Hello, my name is Jessica Putnam, and I am the student coordinator for the Roxborough Roundtables. I would like to welcome everyone to the tables. Today our topic is legalization of marijuana, and I will be your host today.
I'm Dylan Gormley. I'm an LNS major here at Philadelphia University.
My name is Lauren Jabe, and I'm also an LNS major.
My name is Mona Manglania, and I'm a psychology, community, and trauma counseling major.
Monica Levin, second year Law Society major.
Vanessa Putman, I'm staff here at Physical Plants.
Alfonso Mayers, previous LNS, and now I'm staff here at Philly.
Sarah Horn, I'm a fashion merchandising major.
Ashley Haynes, I'm a fashion merchandising major.
Jake New, Law Society major for the U.
Alrighty, so I guess we should start our topic off today by just going around and saying how you feel about legalization of marijuana.
This is Dylan Gormley. I'm for legalization, but in an almost restricted kind of way. I think that it's something that we can gain profit off of, and I think that in the realm of drugs, it's definitely not the worst. And by no means is it any worse than alcohol, and I think the whole dispute's kind of gotten to a ridiculous point.
I think it makes more sense to have it legal than to have it stay in its current state of criminalization.
I feel like what she said, legalizing it, like the factors are more beneficial than having it illegal.
This is Monica. I agree also that it should be legalized. But to a certain extent, I feel like that there should be regulations to marijuana in a certain way that it's like the alcohol drinking age, like that kind of thing.
I agree. I don't see why it shouldn't be legalized. Actually, I feel it should be legalized because it ruins a lot of young people's lives when they get caught with it, and the crime that they actually place on it is, I think, too high for the substance that it is.
Yeah, I would have to agree. On the social aspects, I feel like the legalization of marijuana should go through. Like she said before, there have been a lot of incarcerations of young Black Americans since 1978. So I do believe that marijuana should be allowed, especially on the social aspect.
If I could just interrupt, Evan Lane, Law Society. Is that something you think is intentional or just coincidental regarding the racial aspect of arrest?
If we're talking politics, I'd say yes. It was started by the Nixon administration in the beginning, and then enforced even stronger during the Ronald Reagan era, where they pushed for more incarcerations for the young Black Americans in order to enforce non-drugs in certain cities and areas.
Does anyone else think there's a racial component to pot being illegal, Jess?
Definitely. I would just say, like, the stereotypes that went along with it, especially, like, when they start, like, realizing, like, marijuana coming into the country and how it came with, like, the Mexicans and things of that nature, how they felt as though, like, they made it kind of like they pinned it on the Mexicans as such a horrible thing. So I feel like it was kind of stereotypical with the war on drugs and everything of that nature. So
I'm Sarah. As of now, I don't think I know enough to have a full opinion, but I'd like to learn more, and hopefully by the end of this, I will know if I'm for or against legalization.
This is Ashley. I am for the legalization of marijuana to a certain extent, as Monica said.
This is Jake. Personally, I refuse to respond if I'm for or against legalization of marijuana. However, I do suggest whoever held their opinions onto this, be caution. That, let's say, for marijuana, how are we going to set the punch?
For marijuana legalization. That's the difference in saying
for marijuana legalization, yes. How we set the boundary, is that still considered as a illegal substance? I mean, if they legalize, is that considered as a medicine, or should we just sell it for
recreational
Thank you. Yeah, sell it for recreational use. Or if you're against it, consider about the crime rate, and even you don't legalize it, is that going to reduce or not legalizing it will help the society get rid of it? And what is your purpose of dumping marijuana?
As far as marijuana goes, I think that I know that there are a lot of misconceptions about it. Some people seem to look at it as if it's some sort of medicine. I know that the FDA hasn't approved it in any sense as a medicine, just for basic reasons. It's just as bad as tobacco. I think there's 33 chemicals in marijuana that are in tobacco that cause cancer, and I think it drops about 4 times the amount of tar in your lungs. So it's by no means safe. By no means is it a medicine.
So excuse me, I interrupt here. So you're thinking that maybe marijuana is better for smoking than smoking cigarettes?
No, I'm saying it's just as bad as cigarettes, and a lot of people try and justify.
However, you said 4 times less. Are we now supposed to illegalize the cigarettes and legalize marijuana and let people just buy that in any tobacco shop they want to?
No, all right. So 4 times more the amount, not less.
Okay.
Of tar in your lungs. And as far as like the danger of tobacco and weed go, I think that they're probably, in my opinion, they're on par. They're both lethal. They should be legal. Like if tobacco is legal, I think that marijuana, along with alcohol, the same. I group those together. They should be legal, and you should be able to go into a tobacco shop and get marijuana. But like I was saying, a lot of people try and justify the smoking of marijuana by saying, "Oh, it's kind of a medicine. It's not. It's just as bad as tobacco, and it's dangerous."
So what?
With other people, go ahead.
This is Mona. Maybe like medicinally, there aren't really compounds in it that could act like how most medication act, but like I know according to the National Cancer Institute, like a lot of cancer patients, like I think the number is like 20% of cancer patients don't die from the cancer itself, they die from malnutrition. So in some, I'm not too sure which country, but I know they give some of their cancer patients like tablets of marijuana to give them appetite. So although it's not really like medication, like in the form or whatever sense or how we define medication, like in some way it does help people like who are suffering from like health factors.
This is Dylan Gormley again. You said they gave them pills, correct?
Yeah.
Now you said marijuana pills. Did you mean THC pills, like the active ingredient in it?
I'm not exactly sure, but then I know like on the website they like referenced marijuana. So
yeah, going off that, I think when you're talking about whether or not it's increasing the dangers, and it's just as dangerous as cigarettes, the way it's grown is mostly or actually entirely affiliated to that. So some people grow their marijuana with chemicals and drugs in order to speed the process of selling the drugs in the process. So when you're talking about it's causing more damage, that's because it's probably talking about the actual chemically grown marijuana instead of the natural grown marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you think it is a drug that is dangerous? And let's talk about that first. Do you think, as students, and what you've seen, of course not experienced personally, what you've seen, does it interfere with people doing their work, or does it help them relax?
Hi.
Go ahead.
This is Mona again. I actually attended a forum where a bunch of legislators were trying to like talk about the legalization of marijuana. And this one, he was a senator, and he actually said something that really got to me. And he said, it's kind of controversial, but he said, a man who comes home, or a person, I don't want to use any genders, like a person who comes home drunk would most likely be shouting or screaming or be like abusive or something, but then a person who comes home who smoked marijuana or something would probably go to bed.
Or go make some snacks in the
or
kitchen.
Go make something to eat. Yeah. Probably like grab something to eat and go to bed. Like that was his line, and like the whole room was like kind of laughed at it, but it made so much sense to me because.
This is Monica. I personally think it's how the drug affects you. Different type of alcohol can affect you certain ways. Some people who drink gin become a different person, but they're fine with vodka. I think that how much you smoke, the atmosphere you're in, all these different aspects come into play. If we compare marijuana to alcohol, they're both, yes, they can both be potentially dangerous, but one is legal and how is one not? I feel that you have to use marijuana like you use alcohol responsibly. And like you said, if somebody came home, the difference between that and that. Yeah. I mean, it all depends on the person. Yeah. Totally, it does. But I think it should be used responsibly.
That's the problem. How are we going to make sure after legalizing it, which means people are going to have easier access than it already is in current society, how are we going to make sure people who go buy marijuana, who go smoke marijuana, firstly, they really needed it for whatever their cost. Second, how are we going to make sure they're going to do it responsibly?
I mean, if it was legalized, it could be for everybody, and there would be the same regulations as there would be for alcohol. I mean, personally, I think it should be 21 and over. You can't drive while smoking.
Still get a DUI if
Still
you're...
get a DUI
Yeah,
if you're under the influence.
I'm right now. I'm on the law.org, the American Law Society website. Association website, and the other health effect of marijuana that addresses alerts mood, judgment, and decision making, and so this is critical.
So does alcohol, right?
So does alcohol.
It does the same thing as alcohol.
It's even worse for you than alcohol
Yes.
is. Alcohol causes liver damage. Like all these other aspects. Alcohol is 10 times terrible for you than marijuana.
Really? What about alcohol? Does alcohol impact your short-term memory?
Yes.
Definitely. That's what I'm talking about. Long time consuming. That's for like.
But the argument is getting comparing.
I mean, you have one heavy
Susan,
night.
if I could interrupt, because we're going down a vortex, which is really not worthwhile, comparing it to alcohol. Alcohol is legal. The question is, should the government have the right to make decisions for us? You're saying for adults, for people who are 21 years old, shouldn't they have the right to make the decision whether they want to smoke a joint or not? Why should the government be involved? If the government is involved in cigarettes, which does a lot of damage, if the government isn't involved in alcohol, why should the government be involved in marijuana? I think that's the biggest question. What's worse? We can compare, we can say sugar is worse than all these things.
Definitely. I definitely
sugar does actually, there were studies done that soda causes cancer. That was out in today's paper. The high fructose levels are very damaging. So let's not go down that wormhole. The question is, does the government have the right, the authority, and the reason to tell adults what they can or cannot do regarding this? So that's an issue. What do you think, Jess?
Oh, well, I just wanted to go off of one thing that you did say, the soda versus marijuana.
Right.
I kind of sent out this little, chart thing to some of the people who were in the round table, and basically it kind of shows you, the health risk associated with both, and, some of the health risks for soda was obesity, slower immune system, dissolving bone and teeth, leading cause of childhood diabetes and obesity, and, for health risk for marijuana, it was, short-term impairment, long-term effects have been debated but never proven, no fatal health risk. And then it also goes for medical use. Doctors recommend zero soda consumption. And then they say for marijuana use to treat cancer patients, glaucoma, AIDS patients, etc. So I just thought that was funny that you brought that up, because comparing alcohol and marijuana, you can say the same thing about comparing marijuana and soda, because soda really isn't good for anybody. I don't care how much you love soda, it's really unhealthy. But at the end of the day, they're not the same, on the same playing field.
And look how people fought in New York. They wanted their 42 ounces of soda. They went crazy over that. They wouldn't even allow the regulation.
Soda.
They wouldn't allow the regulation of soda, which does all these bad things.
Right, but why do we regulate marijuana?
And we're not regulating.
Well, I mean,
how?
Yeah.
If I could track back to what Lane pointed out, is the question as to why is it so controversial for the government to get involved. That's one of the biggest questions here, because even if it was legalized, who would control it? Who would control the sale of it? Who would control the growth of it? Who would control the distribution? It's just who would actually control any of it? And I think the government wants a big chunk of that. The government has been known to control a lot of things, especially business. Businesses, even the way we grow our food, GMOs, things like that. But again, the question is whether or not why the government should get involved. And even if they are, what kind of effect would that have on us?
See, that leads to another problem. Assume that tomorrow they're going to legalize marijuana in the entire United States. And how are we going to prevent people against further regulation? That's another problem. Today, we allow you to smoke marijuana. However, you can only buy that from certain places. And tomorrow, people are going to start to yell, oh, I want my marijuana anywhere, like in supermarket, I can just get it. And they're going to start to create chaos among those little details.
Hold on, Lauren.
I mean, well, in Pennsylvania, I'm from New York, so when I first got here, I thought it was really weird that you guys have, like, you can't just go to Rite Aid and pick up,
wine
a
spirits.
6-pack and then go home. So I think people, once you put in a regulation, I'm like, oh, I didn't finish my story. So the first couple weeks, I was really upset. Like, when I turned 21 here, I was like, I can't get anything, and I hated running around all the different stores, but as time went on, I was like, all right, whatever, like, this is just what I have to do because this is what, is being set up. And I think if you were to say, okay, you can only buy marijuana in a smoke shop, or even if you had to make a whole separate store for marijuana, like, I don't think that would be a big problem for people. No one's going to go to Stop and Shop and start screaming, why can't I buy my weed and my flower in the same place? Like, it's not going to matter to people.
Agreed. I mean, right now we have to go to 2 different places if we want to get wine and if we want to get a case of beer. We can't even buy a 6-pack at a beer store where you have to buy a whole case. So these regulations are put in place because the state or the government demands that they are, because they're the ones who are providing it for us. If they were to legalize marijuana in PA, of course there would be restrictions, but we as residents have to abide by that law, So
yeah, that's for sure. But people will get bothered by this. That's even today.
It's better than buying it from the guy on the street in Canada.
It's better than not
Right.
buy it at all.
It'll be safer for one, as you said. You're not trying to find someone who's hustling and who's selling drugs.
That's correct.
I mean, now you would be able to go to a legal place and go purchase marijuana.
And it's regulated.
You
What
don't
about-
have to, because if you figure. A lot of your marijuana dealers also deal other substances.
Cocaine,
So
heroin, and they will lace your stuff.
That's right. That's
Yes.
from
So
perspective,
now
it's
you're
better.
not worried about that because this is being regulated. You're not also worried about you're going to run into someone who's actually coming to buy coke, and you guys, face off at each other because you're trying to get to this deal or whatever like that. I mean, it's making it safer for those people who actually use marijuana for recreational
Or
purposes.
just to get what Fonzie said, the way it's grown now is in a dangerous way.
Right.
When I was in college many, many, many years ago, there was the paraquat scare, which was a chemical that was being put to ward off bugs on the crops, and that was carcinogenic. Those things, people who smoke, would have no idea. I'm referring to the royal we. People who smoke have no idea what chemicals have been used as far as insecticides or as a fertilizer. With government being involved, there'll be regulations what can or cannot be used. So I think as far as safety goes, it will get rid of your problem that you had, Fonzie.
also, along with safety, think of all the people who are in jail right now because they're serving these outrageous sentences due to the fact that they were busted on drugs. I mean, today in class we talked about the fact that somebody who was dealing small portions of marijuana but still dealing was doing a longer sentence than somebody who was charged for rape. Is that crazy?
That is
Yes.
crazy.
And I think the fact that not only if weed was legalized, it would be better for the economy and everything like that. Everybody agrees on that. But it would also be better for these people who are being charged for crimes that they shouldn't be charged for.
Right. And going back to like what you were saying about people getting caught in like neighborhoods and serving long-term years, the communities that these drug dealers are found are usually like poor communities. They will stay that way because of these drug dealers and all these criminal acts that are going on. So if you did legalize at least marijuana, I mean that issue would a little bit become better.
Yeah,
I
and
know that
police.
just talking to police officers that are friends,
Yeah.
I know that a lot of them they talk about it openly in the station, like, oh man, this kid, I caught him with like so and so amount of weed, and it's like I feel bad, like it's such, I've got other stuff I have to worry about, like what about that heroin or coke out there that I can go after? But instead, I have to deal with this college kid who I caught with like an ounce of weed on him, and now he's got to go through all this stuff.
Right.
And then talk about not getting job opportunities after
that. And it's just
like you're in jail for a drug, basically. I mean, how's that going to look on your resume? These everyday people who are getting caught with a drug that's legal in some states or in other countries can't get a job or can't support themselves because they got caught with weed.
Well, not only that, but you have to think about how many of the people, like, that was their only vice. Like, little kid, not little kid, but, high schooler goes in because they get caught with, the tiniest amount of weed, and they go into jail, and that's where they learn from the real criminals
how to be a criminal.
Yeah, and then so you're totally screwing up the kid's life over something that was seen as medicine for 5,000 years.
I was reading, since Jessica was doing this, I read up on a few articles just to see some of the concerns that people had, and one of the concerns that they had brought up was you make it legalized, now everybody's going to smoke it.
Great question.
They found out that it's not true. I mean, the same people who are smoking it, but they're not worried about getting caught smoking it now. They actually saw a decline in teenage use because it got legal. I mean, if you look at teenagers at a certain age, a lot of times they're smoking this is peer pressure. My friends have this drug and they're smoking this drug. And
no, that's they're telling you no.
And it's rebellious.
So now it's legal. All right, well, we don't want to do that anymore. Or whatever their reasoning is, they're seeing that decline in that age group once they made it legal. And the concern about, now you're going to have so many people smoking. It's the same people who were smoking before.
That kind of goes with, like, not to bring up alcohol again, but, like, with the 18th Amendment, when, like, alcohol is illegal,
right.
Like, everyone went crazy, but when, like, they repealed that, then, like, it went back to its regular state.
And look at the organized crime that grew out of it.
Yeah.
And getting back again to Fonzie's point on government growing it, the money would go to the government. It would pay for various different programs. The money's now going to cartels in Colombia.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And the danger, this when you're dealing with multi-billion-dollar business, people are getting killed, and that's not uncommon.
But even then, how much of the cartel's profit is marijuana? I mean, I'm sure it is, but how much what else do they have there?
But you got to think about it. If you can give somebody marijuana and lace it with a little bit of cocaine and get them hooked on something else, it's like you just started yourself a better business because now you have a client that wants something heavier because you laced them with something.
Even if it was a small portion of their business, it's still taking one step further in fighting that crime.
Okay, so what if the government decide to take a step further, or people start to using this marijuana thing as an excuse, try to propose legalizing other drugs?
It's a slippery slope argument, though, because what you're trying to say is, like, if we legalize this and this is illegal, blah, 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 going forward.
However, that's possible, and there's potential for
And
that.
I totally understand, because Argentina, everything's legal there. Every single kind of drug is legal there. So, yeah, everything. But that's because the crime rate was so high that they had to do this in order to keep the prisons clear for the people who are actually committing crimes.
Netherlands, one of the countries with the smallest crime rate in the entire country, they basically, practically, they legalize any type of drug in Netherlands.
They legalize the distribution of it. Only the distribution.
Yes, the distribution.
And they're only allowed it through small retail stores. They don't sell in wholesale.
Of course they don't.
Yeah, I mean, but we're talking about Argentina, where you would get, like,
we're talking about the crime rate, and that's one of the major things we have to look into in this conversation. And how are we going to ensure that crime rate will reduce? After all, the law and crime, they're set by the government.
Well, first off, the criminals in quotations, who are going in right now for selling weed or buying weed, who get caught with weed, they come out worse criminals because our prison system here in the United States is absolutely horrible. Yep. It's supposed to be about reform, but it actually turns criminals into worse criminals in the end. Yeah. So if we're putting somebody in jail who got caught with 2 ounces of weed and was intent to sell with somebody who was a gang member or something small, committed like robbery or something like that. If he's in that environment and has the burden of being a criminal nowadays, he's going to act like that when he comes out. He's not going to be reformed at all. Not to mention our prison systems are horrible. They do not reform criminals. They only make them worse.
I'd like to address something Jake brought up, the slippery slope, as you said, Mona. Just because you legalize one thing doesn't mean you legalize all. Cocaine is dangerous and destructive and addictive. Marijuana has not been proven addictive, and the addictive qualities of it are extremely low and are psychologically, not physically addicting. Cocaine is physically and psychologically addicting and does a tremendous amount of damage to your system. So you can take each drug. Just because you say one doesn't mean you say all. We're not going to legalize everything that's dangerous, but we have to look at things. When the government gets involved, we have to weigh it. We want the government out of our lives, but we want them there to prevent dangerous things. So the question becomes, is pot dangerous? Is it addictive? Is it a gateway drug? Is it destructive of people of your age and your work ethic and all those things? Those are the things I would like you guys to address. Is it addictive, or is it a gateway drug, or is it destructive? Have you seen people destroyed that you know by it?
You can't deny the fact that marijuana right now is a gateway drug. But I feel that if it was legalized, it would take off, like what you were saying, the peer pressure or the rebellion kind of a thing. If marijuana was legalized and controlled, then yes, people at first would want to try it. But a lot of people, I know right now that if weed was legalized, I wouldn't use it. That's me personally, because I don't like the effects of it. But some people don't like alcohol, and they won't drink vodka or anything like that. The fact of the matter is that if weed was legalized, it would take away certain elements to it. Just like the drinking age in Europe is 12 in some places. And people don't abuse alcohol. Teenagers aren't sneaking alcohol. I mean, I know this is a totally different thing, but if the alcohol age, the age of consumption was lowered, studies show that less teenagers would actually use it underground, in basements, get alcohol poisoning, that kind of stuff. It would be in a controlled environment. The same thing with marijuana. It would be now in an open and controlled environment.
And going off on that, in one of my psychology classes, we watched a documentary comparing underage kids drinking alcohol in America and how it is like in some parts of the UK. And this one mother from the UK was saying how she allows her son to drink in front of them, like openly, because of that, her son doesn't really like care to drink because it's something so normal, something like he was raised his whole life understanding like, oh, it's normal. It's like, why am I gonna go crazy drinking? Like how it is here in America, how it's illegal that like teens are like tempted to do this because it's so bad and they want to like break the rules and that kind of mindset.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like when you first come into college. If you've been sheltered your entire life, you never really went out, you never got to pretty much explore your natural instinct to kind of like rebel against everything that you know. Once you get to college and you're on your own, you're completely free. It's like, ooh, what can I get into now? What am I going to do?
Your mother's here.
I know she's here, and I'm perfectly fine.
Completely agree with you, because I think everybody in this room has had that one friend where they weren't allowed to do anything
and they
whole
went
life.
crazy.
They were sheltered, everything like that. They go off to college and they even they do everything from failing out to like just getting wasted every night. It's opposite mindset. You have to tell a teenager that they can do this, that they have free range, and they can become a responsible adult because they learn from that.
I just have something on the gateway effect. This is Andrew Morrow. He's a PhD. They actually did a study in the UK, and this was published in the UK Journal of Addiction. They've shown that the marijuana gateway effect is not the best explanation for the link between marijuana use and the use of harder drugs. An alternative, simpler, and more compelling explanation accounts for the pattern of drug use you see in the country without resort to any gateway effects. While the gateway theory has enjoyed popular acceptance, scientists have always had their doubts. The people who are predisposed to use drugs and have the opportunity to use drugs are more likely than others to use both marijuana and harder drugs. Marijuana typically comes first because it's more available.
And that is the science. So the gateway argument is a correlational argument.
Right.
It is not a causation argument. And that's often brought out, and it's wrong.
Right.
Okay? So I'm interested. Oh, yeah, we need pictures. We need lots of pictures. Right?
And that's the thing. Is if you're going to, you find most people who use drugs are using drugs because that's what they're going to do. They're going to use drugs. Those that that's something they want to do. If they're smoking marijuana, it doesn't mean, oh, now I got to go try cocaine, or I got to go try this. I mean, to say it's a gateway, like they were saying, is that you just know, it's much easier for someone to get a hold of marijuana than it is to get a hold of cocaine or heroin or something.
So if we dealt with the argument that if we remove the illegality, that people will be more cool about it and not freak out, like you said, Monica. It isn't a gateway drug. It isn't addictive. We know that. It's very science has shown. So why is it illegal?
It's illegal because I want to say that back in the day, a lot of people didn't know much about it.
Reefer madness.
Yeah, it was all those speculations. I basically think our government was afraid of it. The time period was the 1950s, where nobody should be doing drugs whatsoever. Everybody was household suburban families. But then came the age of the 70s and the 60s, and people started to explore more and realized that weed wasn't that harmful, but the people who controlled government, the older people, basically said, no, it's harmful. Look at these hippies, like, running around.
And the jazz musicians and their little clubs.
They were rebellious for their time. Now we're coming into this new modern age where we're realizing that the 1950s mindset is no longer here because we see that the effects of marijuana aren't bad or as bad as alcohol, which is legal, by the way.
I think the other reason is honestly that I don't think governments, except for like now with the taxation, like back then they disallowed it because industries were competing with hemp and everything on all different sorts of levels, and we're still stuck in that rut that it's like the government is that, this is a competition and we need to keep they're not focused on looking at the positive aspects. They're just like, well, my great-great-granddad said it was bad, so I'm just going to keep saying it's bad.
And we should not forget the Anslinger Effect. Some of you who've taken my class know that. The guy, William Anslinger, who started all this, who was the drug czar at the time, the reason why pot was made illegal, and he said it, it's not my words, it's his, because it was feared because black people were doing pot, it was their drug of choice at the time, the jazz groups, whatever, and that they would get out of control and rape white women. That was his words. And it was illegalized because it was feared that the growing migration of blacks from the South into the North would pose a danger, all stoned out on pot, and they would be raping white women. That's, if you really want to know why pot was made illegal, it's purely racism.
I mean, there's another reason. It goes before that, too. After the Spanish-American War, when all the immigrants were coming in from Mexico, like we had known it as cannabis. And it was in all of our medicines. Like a lot of American households had it in their bathroom, in one form of medication or another. But then the Mexican immigrants started calling it marijuana, and then they're like, well, I don't know what that is, and that's scaring me, and I don't like that. So then,
it's dirty.
Yeah,
the blacks are doing it, the Mexicans are doing it. It's dirty, but the white people are drinking martinis, so it's okay.
It's the same thing that happened in San
doing
Francisco with opium, trying to get the Chinese immigrants out. But I mean, except opium, like let's be honest, that is kind of a little out there.
That's a little too far.
But El Paso, Texas took a playbook out of San Francisco's, and then that's what started the whole country followed them.
Exactly. It was a race issue then, and when the presidents declared war on drugs, it was a race issue then. So now, in a country where racism is not completely gone whatsoever, but more understanding. We're a generation that definitely better understands this. How can we not legalize it?
Yeah. But then you kind of got to think about like the people who are still in office and who we vote in as younger people,
Older white males.
right? Who are still stuck in that like past generation somewhat. That if we got to be careful who we vote in too if we really want this to happen.
Well, that's happening in Pennsylvania. The last governor, it passed the Medical Marijuana Act that Dale Leach was working on.
Senator Dale Leach.
Senator Dale Leach.
It passed the one house.
Passed in the Senate.
Yeah,
and then they decided not to try it in the House yet because they knew that the last governor was going to veto it. So now the new guy that we voted in, he's all, well, I don't want to say he's all for it,
but he's up to listening to it.
Yes, he's very open about it and doesn't come in with judgments already. So I think they're going to try it again.
I'm interested in our student there who was on the fence. What do you want to know, or what have you learned?
Well, I have heard a lot of interesting points, and I think that one of the most important things that we have to keep in mind is probably the criminal rates, because wasn't there something, because marijuana is legalized in California, yeah?
It's medical marijuana,
Medical
but
marijuana?
basically, if you have a sore thumb, you can get a.
Basically.
I got fake glaucoma.
It's basically legal. Put it that way. In Colorado, it's fully legal.
It is?
Yeah.
In Washington.
And Washington.
Washington State.
Yes.
So, did they do studies in those states where they proved that legalizing marijuana would bring the crime rate down?
It's too early in Colorado, but surprisingly, the use has been a lot less than they thought. And it's funny because now the state is disappointed that people are not smoking as much because they're not making as much on the taxes on it. So they really were surprised that the use isn't as great as they thought it was. So that's coming in right now. So the use level didn't go wild. If anything, it's remained the same or went lower. But as far as crime rates go, it's too early to determine. Same thing in Washington.
The amount of money that they have made off of it has really pushed Colorado towards the right way. And it's leading in states right now. I mean, everybody talks about Colorado. Everybody wants to go visit. I mean, it's hyped up their traveling so much, their tourism industry, everything like that.
Which is really one of the reasons.
Yeah, which is benefits for the country. I mean, for the state. And,
And what else?
Yeah, their schools
That
have
was
gotten
impressive
better.
too.
Yeah,
What
their
else?
schools have gotten better.
What else?
I just think that because they have tested this out in Colorado and it's shown that it's done the state better, that I think based on different experiments like that, I think that it should be legalized. If they can do it more, like one state at a time. Because if you have it in just one state, there's 50 of them. They could all turn out differently, depending on the kinds of people that live there. So I think that maybe if they should take it maybe one or two states at a time and just see in different settings how people react.
A careful experiment.
Yeah.
Saying.
I totally agree. And I think one way we should do that is take steps, maybe not totally legalize marijuana right away, maybe
Start with medical.
start with medical. Also, lessen the criminal
Decriminalization.
penalizations for this drug. I mean, we've already started that a little bit. Hasn't it gone down? Now it's only a misdemeanor.
You get $25. You get a $25 fine your first.
In Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia, yes. In Philadelphia.
Yeah. So it's like a citation almost.
So
Like
soon as some
jaywalking.
marijuana, you get a civil fine of $25.
Yes.
Do you get a fine for jaywalking?
I mean, technically, but no one does. It's
Oh.
like
Yeah.
No, because she said like jaywalking, and I was just like,
No, I mean,
you get a fine for that? I didn't know that.
Jaywalking should be illegal, but not marijuana.
I mean, if you get if you get an underage like in PA, it's like $300 by the time you're all done. So the fact that they're lessening it a lot with marijuana, I think that's.
Can I ask you a question? We've been avoiding this. Have you seen people that you know who have used it poorly and it has been detrimental in their studies, their work, and so forth? Has anyone experienced that?
I personally haven't. I've seen some people.
I have. I've got a friend who, he is a friend. He was going to college. It was his sophomore year. He got into an ROTC and he in high school he'd fall into that category of addicted. Absolutely, he could not function without it. It got to like a really bad point, and it was the end of his freshman year of college. He just, because he was in the ROTC program, could not. He was just like constantly thought about it.
I mean, there are people like that. I mean, I'd like to call them greedy-minded people. I mean, we have people that are addicted to Advil. So, I mean, that dude was probably too high to function. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it totally ruined his college career. It absolutely was weed too, 100%. The kid, and I mean, that's so ridiculous to me, but that's what happened. If it's just a ridiculous story, but it happens. Like,
the same thing happens with alcohol.
Exactly.
I mean, the same effect that can have the same effect on a kid going to school and they start drinking alcohol and they just get addicted to alcohol.
I know someone who's like addicted to NyQuil. Takes NyQuil every night. Like I talked to her and told her to take ZQL because if it's to sleep, then you don't need NyQuil because you're not sick.
Yeah, that's why they made ZQL.
That's like my point. Like the argument of it being addictive or it being a gateway drug. It's a slippery slope because anything in the world, it's all about perception. Like it took this long for gay marriage to be viewed correctly. Like it's all about perspective.
Yeah, I know people who are addicted to caffeine. Like literally can drink soda after soda.
Can't go a day without coffee. Yeah, but I'm gonna say one of my roommates because I have 4 others, so it's okay. She smokes 3 times a day, and she is like, I wouldn't call her. Yeah, I would guess you could call her addicted, but she could go a day without smoking. But she's kind of crazy. She's like absolutely kind of crazy. She is 100% addicted to Adderall. Like, if she does not have Adderall, like her Adderall every single day, she, like, literally gets absolutely insane, like, girl crazy. Like, and so, like, I would say smoking actually mellows her out. It's not only that, but she doesn't eat all day because she's on Adderall. So when she finally does, like, eat, it's because she smokes. So maybe that is a good thing. But Adderall is what the doctor prescribes her. That makes her absolutely crazy. So, I mean, anybody could be addicted to anything. You get prescribed for these drugs, and then by your doctor, and then all of a sudden you're addicted to those drugs. So, I mean, some people might need marijuana in their life. Like,
and I know, like, I mean, there are a lot of like ways to cure depression or whatever. But like, I personally know a lot of people who've like gone through hard times, and like I've seen them like on like how they are when they've smoked marijuana, and they're like better than how they are without it.
But these are just some cases.
Yeah.
I mean, other people they have bad side effects and then they never smoke again. Like my one friend from home smoked once and she had such a bad side effect she'll never smoke again in her life. So
that goes for like alcohol. Like my one friend turned 21 and drank like 1 can of beer and is paranoid. Like would never drink any alcohol.
I can't go near pink lemonade brunettes. It's not a freshman year. Like nobody can go near it. Like
she can drink. She's legally allowed to drink. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
I just want to ask one more question, then I'll throw it over to Jessica because we're running out of time. But is there a negative connotation? Because I know your mom and I are similar generations. Is there a negative connotation that other people believe, maybe older people who smoke pot, there's something wrong with them, they're a lower class, or they're a hippie, whatever it may be, as opposed to someone who drinks, which is acceptable? Is there that connotation that you've seen that people react to?
Absolutely. I mean, even in high school, you called the people who smoked all the time stoners, and it was a negative aspect. So,
not only that, those were like the skeevy kids that you didn't want to go around. Yeah. And then you get to college, and like you hang out with some people, and then all of a sudden, like 2 weeks later, you find out that they're big potheads, and you're like, never would have thought. Like you're not the stereotypical image.
Would you have the same view if you knew they drank a lot? Or is there something about pot that is a negative connotation to it?
I just want to say I think it's because of like the DARE programs. Because I know in grade school DARE was like terrifying. Everything they showed you was like death, and you're gonna die. You smoke pot, you die. You do anything, you die. And it's just like, that's scary. So it's like when you see someone smoke when you're younger and like in high school and stuff, like you don't really know a lot about it because you were never taught about it. So like when you see it happen, it's kind of like, that's strange, stay away from me. But whereas alcohol, like, it's legal, so adults do it. People that you know do it legally. You're kind of like, you know what happens. You see everything before you hit a certain age.
Like you want to be older, so you drink too.
Right. So it's like for people who drink, you're kind of like already know what happens to them. You already kind of know like the things. But with people who smoke weed, you don't really know because you were never taught about it. So you're just kind of on the backfield of
So
like.
if it's legal, that will disappear then, that negative connotation to it.
I want to say in future generations, maybe it will take a while, but I mean, it's still the same thing as like some people will never touch a drink because they don't like the way it affected people around them. And I think that would be the same for weed, but I mean, I don't see why it shouldn't be legal.
No names, so nobody knows anybody I know. But I mean, I grew up with, and in my generation, I grew up with a lot of people who smoked, and they still smoke to this day. They still have their medicine, as my one friend calls it, and the other one has their cigarette, as they call it, and it's like, you know, and it's a normal thing. I have a cousin lives in Arizona, and before he eats dinner, he sits there and he's in his 60s, well in his 60s. He's retired and all, and he lights himself up, and before he has dinner, he said it helps him eat.
And these are all functioning adults.
Yeah.
What difference is taking a martini? Exactly. What's the difference?
Right. I mean, and he sits in his house, and I mean, but he has custody of his grandchild. He has, he does what he's supposed to. He worked all his life.
Yeah.
He pays his bills. He owns a house.
He's a contributing member to society.
Yeah, unless you were sitting in his house at dinner time before dinner and eating it up, something like that. So people from back, I think, in generations when, I guess the 70s and all like that were smoking and continue to smoke, you don't even know they smoke.
Yeah.
You know?
All of our grandparents in this room have probably smoked before. They just don't tell you. I don't know.
Why are you looking at me?
Everyone look at Lane.
I'm not a grandparent yet.
You're almost there.
Almost there.
Almost.
Okay, so anyway.
Alrighty, so I just want to thank everybody for coming out. This was a really great discussion. I enjoyed everything everyone said, and I hope that the listeners get a lot out of this and are able to form a valuable opinion to society, and maybe we can change the law. Thank you.
Thank you.